When the German women POWs were first transported to American-run camps in the closing months of World War II, many of them were terrified, convinced that the Allies, whom Nazi propaganda had described as brutal monsters, would torture or starve them. But the unseen reality captured in diaries, interviews, and military reports tells a completely different story. One that begins the moment these exhausted women, many of them former nurses, clerks, auxiliaries, and factory workers pressed into service by the collapsing Reich, arrived behind the barbed wire and noticed something that stunned them right away. The Americans treated them not with hatred, but with procedure, calmness, and even an unexpected sense of dignity, issuing clean uniforms, blankets, and basic medical checks before escorting them to the camp mess hall, where their greatest shock awaited them. Instead of the slop-filled tin bowls, dirty floors, or chaotic food lines they had feared, they walked into a dining area with long wooden tables, trays neatly stacked, and American cooks preparing meals with an efficiency they had never imagined. And when the women were handed proper silverware, forks, knives, and spoons, many simply froze, unsure whether it was a mistake or some kind of trick, because in the final year of the war, most of them had been surviving on scraps, black bread, watery soup, or dried vegetables eaten with their hands in bombed-out basements, trenches, and makeshift barracks. Yet now American guards calmly instructed them to sit down, wait their turn, and eat in order, something so alien to them that several women later admitted they almost cried at the simple civility. The footage and testimonies describe how a hush fell over the mess hall as the women slowly cut into their first warm meal. Potatoes, meat, gravy, sometimes even milk or fruit, tasting food that didn't just fill their stomachs, but reminded them of a world before the terror. And as they looked around, they realized the guards weren't yelling, hitting, or threatening them like they expected, but walking calmly, chatting quietly, and even assisting the older or injured women to sit comfortably. And it was at this moment many POWs confessed that their entire understanding of the enemy collapsed, because the Americans weren't treating them as criminals or monsters, but as human beings. A shock that few could process after years of Nazi indoctrination. In the weeks that followed, their disbelief only deepened as the daily routine proved stable and structured. Morning roll call without intimidation, medical examinations where American doctors treated infected wounds and malnutrition, Red Cross parcels distributed fairly, and a cafeteria that continued to operate with forks and knives every single day, reinforcing a sense of order the women had not felt in years. And some later recounted how they secretly practiced American table manners, unsure whether they were expected to behave in a certain way or whether the simple politeness shown to them was real. Yet the guards often smiled, saying, "Just eat, you're safe now." Words the women carried with them for the rest of their lives. Diaries recovered decades later describe how mealtime became a moment of surreal peace, where women discussed their past lives, their lost homes, and their fears for their families still trapped in the rubble of Germany, all while using utensils they once believed symbolized civilization that the war had stolen from them. And although camp life was still harsh, barbed wire, strict rules, and the uncertainty of the future, the contrast between their expectations and reality remained overwhelming, with many acknowledging that the Americans showed a level of discipline and generosity that contradicted every rumor spread by the Nazi regime, making the forks and knives not just tools for eating, but symbols of unexpected humanity in the middle of a global catastrophe. As time passed, some women even volunteered for work details, helping in the kitchens, gardens, or laundry, where they interacted more closely with American personnel and were amazed by the casual conversations, the jokes shared over meal prep, and the complete absence of the cruelty they were conditioned to expect. And these experiences planted seeds of understanding that many would not fully appreciate until years later when they returned home and realized that the moment they sat down in that mess hall holding American silverware was the first time they felt the war's dehumanizing grip loosening. The footage and testimonies from these camps reveal that for many German women POWs, the most unforgettable moment wasn't liberation, capture, or interrogation, but that first meal eaten with forks and knives. Simple objects that reminded them that even after a world-shattering conflict, decency and dignity could still exist, and that sometimes the smallest gestures of humanity leave the deepest impact, shaping memories that lasted long after the fences came down and the war finally ended.